from DIYDork.com. Today I want to show you how to make over one of those really simple Ikea Lack tables into something really awesome. Now I actually made two different versions, so I split it up into two different videos so it don't get too long. So check this out, this is a really cool project. Alright, so if you saw my previous video, you know that I just recently purchased several sets of these Lack tables from Ikea. Very, very basic table, just the most rudimentary elements that a table needs, but you can really customize these and they turn out really great. And the cool thing is that they're so cheap that you can just redo them just a little bit and you can flip them and make pretty decent money off of them in just an afternoon. Now I bought these, all of them that I bought were white, but they also had them in black and they were $7.99 a piece. And then they also had some that were different colors, seems like maybe yellow or red or something like that, green, and they were $10 a piece. Now I went with the cheap ones because, like I said, I'm going to totally cover them and paint them, so I wanted to save a little money. Now if you didn't want to buy new and you wanted to go the recycled route, you can even find them on Craigslist, and they're usually listed for about $5. If they're any more than that, you might as well buy new ones, or at least talk to the seller and get them for $5, because they're on there all the time and they're just trying to get rid of them, so they'd probably take $5. And the other thing is that these are the ones from Ikea, so they are roughly 22 by 22, but I've also messed with the set that come from Target and they were 18 by 18. And it seems like maybe at one time even Walmart or some other stores like that had them, so they're listed all the time. People just getting rid of them for whatever reason. They're, you know, they just don't want them anymore, or their kids graduated college and they don't need stuff for their dorm or whatever. But anyway, they're listed all the time and you can reuse them, and it's just a really cool base to really go wild with a different top. And you know, all the structure's made, so you're really just kind of putting decoration on them and making them just a little bit more elevated looking. So anyway, let's get started on this set. Right now, in this version 2 of the tables, instead of using wide planks of pallet wood, I'm using these little thin strips of wood that come from some reclaimed 2x4s. Now, what I did was I had a whole bunch of 2x4s left over from when we reinstalled windows in our house, because it just had 2x4 painted white as the trim around all the windows. So when we tore that out, I kept them and I sliced them down this way, so you can see along the skinny side. And I got these little slats here. All right, now they are rough and they have the saw marks on them, but what's cool is that when I sand them down, I'll get rid of the really like gritty part of it, but the swirl marks from the saw blade will remain. It gives it a really cool look. And basically we're getting double use out of these, so basically don't cost anything. Now the design is going to be really simple, and in the last set I had a diagonal design, which is probably slightly more simple than what I'm going to do here, but this is still really easy. So I just divide it in half both ways, and if you don't want to do the math and you do have a set of Ikea tables, halfway is basically 10 7/8, because they're not quite 22 inches wide. So I just found 10 7/8, drew some lines so I have quadrants, and what I'm going to do is really simple. After I sand these boards, I'm going to have a set of slats going this way, and I'll do the same up here, and then checkerboard style, the other slats will go this way over here and then down on this quadrant. Should be really cool, really simple design. Once those are on, then I will cover the sides and the little bit of space that the you know, little slats will take up on top, and I'll cover that whole thing with wood on the side to trim them out. And then I'm going to distress paint the bottom legs with some silver, and it gives it kind of a galvanized metal look. Really, really cool. So I'm gonna go outside, I'll save some time, and I'll go ahead and sand these up and get them cut so they're ready to start putting on, and then I'll show you how I prep the top before we start gluing and nailing them all on there. Alright, I just got back in from cutting all my slats to fit on the table, and I went ahead and cut them at that 10 7/8 so that they fit just inside my little quadrant, so I can line them up like this, and then the ones over there I'll line up like that. Do it sort of checkerboard style. And not only did I cut them, but I went ahead and I sanded all of these top edges right here. So the bottom I didn't sand at all. I didn't sand these edges, but I completely sanded the top, and then here just slightly round them off. So that way, when they're stacked together, it'll be nice and smooth. There will be no snags, and then there's just a slight dip in between each one, just a real quick little dip. But this looks really cool and kind of finishes off the piece, and looks really nice. Now before I actually just start gluing and nailing them to the tabletop, I need to prep the tabletop so it'll actually hold on, because I don't know how well glue would actually stick to this paint. So what I've done is made a real mess over here on this one. But first of all, you can't tell, but the sides here are apparently some kind of thick laminate. I don't think they're paint over here. So I have sanded these, but it did not go all the way down to like the particle board or whatever this material is underneath. But on top, the paint come right off. And I just took my orbital sander and just held it until all the paint disappeared and just slowly went along and made these little lines. And this one's kind of a mistake because I made 6 lines to put glue for 6 slats, but then I remembered that I actually had 7 slats per quadrant, so I'll have to figure that out. But on the one over there, I'll go ahead and sand 7 stripes on each little quadrant, and then I'll just put a little strip of glue on there, and then the wood will be able, the wood glue will have a place to stick onto the table, hopefully slightly soak through into the wood, and then also onto my little slats for extra strength, and when I nail them to hold them in place, should be good to go. So I'll go ahead and I will sand the one over there and get it prepped, and then I'll show you how to glue and nail them on. Alright, so I went ahead and I sanded the paint off and the stripes, and I did this one correctly, by the way. Alright, and then I just put a strip of glue on all those, and now all I got to do is lay the wood slats on there. I'll show you how I do it, at least the way I found it makes it a little easier. Alright, so take 7 of these. So I kind of pre-lay them out, make sure it's kind of the design I want to do, that it looks okay. And then what I do is I lay out the 2 outside ones first. Alright, I go ahead and pop them in. I'm just using a brad nailer, I think it's 18 gauge, not very long, I don't know, 1.25" nails or something like that. Alright, now making sure this end butts up right with my pencil line I drew earlier when I drew out these quadrants. Pop 3 nails in there, one in the middle. Alright, now I'm going to go over here to the end, and this one's a little trickier. I'm going to line it up to the edge so it meets this corner, this edge over here, and the corner over here on this edge. And then this one will want to slide around a little bit, so you got to be careful. Alright, make sure it looks good. See it sliding on me a little bit, and okay. Put 2 more in there. Alright, and then what I do is I go ahead and just pop the rest in there loose, and you'll see why in just a second. Drop all these in, and what's going to happen is there's going to be a little bit of gap in between them, so you kind of play with the gaps and make it look even. It's just because these aren't quite wide enough to cover the whole thing. You can see right there I have a pretty good sized gap, so you just got to play with these a little bit. Just start shoving them around. Eventually close up that gap, make it look okay. And there will be a little hint of gap anyway, no big deal. Alright, I think it'll look good enough, so what I'm going to do is I start nailing the second one, then the second one over here, the third one, and finish in the middle. So I'll get them all done and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, there we go. So I got them all in. I have a little bit of big gap here. I probably should have placed these a little better, but it'll be okay. I mean, it is a handmade table, so that's fine. The other's a little closer, so anyway, I'll finish out the rest, and then I'll show you real quick how to do the edges. It's really simple, too. All right, now that all my slats on, it's time to put on the side trim. So what I did was I cut some more wood that is a little thicker than the slats I put on there, just for a little bit of extra durability. Then what I did is I measured from down at the bottom of this to the top of these. It ended up being 2¼ inches, so that's how wide I made these. All right, it's real simple. I'm just going to glue, nail them with 5 nails. On 2 sides, I made these boards exactly as wide as the table, so from edge to edge, it fits perfectly. All right, and then on 2 other sides, I made them as wide as the edge of the table plus the width of this wood, so that way it will meet just like that and be nice and flush right here. All right, once I made sure those all fit, then I just ran them in my sander, oops, and just rounded off the corners a little bit, smoothed them out, so now they're ready to put on there. So like I said, I'll just run a strip of glue, a couple of nails to be all done. I'll show you it looks like it's all finished. All right, check it out now. It looks really nice. Got that trim on there. Just really cleans it up, adds the extra little detail that makes this piece look, you know, nice and handmade, even though it's just a rewrapped IKEA table. All right, so the wood looks really good and the legs look really good, but I want to protect it so that, like if you set a drink on there, you know, it's not going to water stain or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is unscrew the legs from the bottom, and I'm going to paint those with metallic aluminum spray paint. And then I'm going to take my fine grit sanding block. I'm just going to lightly sand them, and it's going to end up with like a galvanized metal look. It looks really awesome. I'll show you when it's finished. All right, then for the top, all this wood, I need to protect it. So I'm just going to use some of this clear lacquer. It's a satin finish. I just use one of those cheap brushes. The little bristles will kind of come out, so you have to kind of pick them out sometimes. But the reason I use these is, as you can see, it'll ruin a good brush. Once I dip that in there, that'll kind of melt it back down. So anyway, I'm going to put a real heavy coat on there at first, let it totally dry outside, and you got to apply this stuff outside because it smells terrible. You definitely don't want to do it inside. All right, so once it dries, I'm going to use my sanding block again and just go over it real quick, because when you put this clear coat on, this wood, it will kind of bring up the texture and it'll feel really rough. But if you run a fine grit sanding block over it, it'll smooth out the clear coat, so that way when you put the second one on, it'll feel really nice and smooth and slick. So I'll show you all of it when it's totally finished. All right, check it out, they're all finished. Turned out really cool. After I applied that clear lacquer and I sanded it, they're really nice and smooth, and it really brought out the richness of the wood. Check out those reds and the grays popping out. It looks really, really awesome. And speaking of gray, look at how the legs turned out. Sprayed them metallic silver, and then I sanded them, and I went a little heavier than normal so that to get some really cool white popping through and the distressed marks. But look at how it actually looks like galvanized metal. It's a really cool effect. Just spray paint and a fine grit sanding block. But anyway, it turned out really awesome, and you'd never think that these were cheap little $8 IKEA tables. Turned out really, really cool.